There are hundreds of basic and alternate recipes in Satisfactory 1.0. Some of them are absolutely amazing, whilst others not so much. So I've made it my mission in Satisfactory to compare every single recipe in the game to inform you guys on what the best and worst recipes are. So welcome to the best recipes in Satisfactory 1.0 series. Today's video is all about the dark matter crystal. It's been about 2 months since I last talked about a 1.0 item in Satisfactory. I'm very excited to be back talking about the dark matter crystal, since there are 3 recipes and there's one recipe in particular that might surprise you. So I've gone ahead and laid out all 3 recipes. Try and find the best one. Also, let me know in the comments of today's video, would you like a video about circuit boards, even AI limiters, and even high-speed connectors, since I'm thinking about covering all of them in an upcoming video. So do let me know if that does indeed interest you. Without further ado, let's discuss recipe number 1, which is the dark matter crystal basic recipe. And for all 3 examples, we'll be creating 20 dark matter crystals. Here we need 2 things in particular. We need diamonds and dark matter residue. This is where we'll begin with the dark matter residue, since we are going to need 100 per minute. Luckily, to make this dark matter residue, there's multiple different ways. Depending on what method you use, you could potentially get all of this for free. More about that in just a moment. First though, let's talk a little bit about the converter, since we are going to be using this machine quite a lot today. And this is the first way that you can produce your dark matter residue. To make 100 of these things per minute, we have to use 50 reanimated SAM. And when it comes to power consumption, as you can see, it does fluctuate a little bit. So in general, you'll be using about 400 megawatts worth of power to create this, which obviously is 100 times more than a constructor, which is obviously quite a lot. But as I previously mentioned, it does fluctuate. I'll talk a bit more about this later on. How on earth can you get dark matter residue for free? Well, for that, we have to use something called the quantum encoder, which is another Phase 5 part introduced in Satisfactory 1.0. No matter what you make in the quantum encoder, everything produces dark matter residue as a byproduct, whether that's a superposition oscillator, or the AI expansion servers, the neuroquantum processor, the alien power matrix, Fixonium fuel rods, or even the synthetic power shard. So, if you do make any of these pieces, you just so happen to have a bunch of dark matter residue built up, well, you can always use it for this. But as you might have seen, these things aren't easy to construct at all. Especially when it comes to something like the alien power matrix. This is rather insane. Let's say, however, you don't have any dark matter residue left over from your previous quantum encoder production. Don't worry. You can make 100 of it by using 50 reanimated SAM, which is made in the constructor. To make that, you are going to need 200 SAM, which can be found all over the map. This is a rather simple process. It will consume quite a bit of power, but unfortunately, there's not really too much you can do about that. But there is something you can do about the diamonds. What you are currently seeing is the basic diamond recipe, but there's more than just one. In fact, there are 6 total diamond recipes in the game, which can be quite overwhelming. However, I have made this tutorial on screen, which goes over every single diamond recipe and which one might suit you. One of them in particular I find very underrated. However, for today's example, I'll be using the basic diamond recipe just to try and make everything a little bit easier to understand. So for this, we are going to need, and this is not a typo by the way, yes, that is 400 core per minute just to make your 20 diamonds. It is expensive and it produces, or requires should I say, quite a lot of power. Just very quickly, if you enjoy videos like this and you want more guides, tips and tricks, then feel free to subscribe if you wish. You don't have to, but it's a good way to support the channel. You'll also get notified whenever I drop one of these videos. Thank you for all the continued support on the channel, but without further ado, let's get straight back into the video. So in total, let's have a quick analysis of everything that we need. So, for our particle accelerators, we need 2 of them, which in total will be consuming roughly, not exactly, 2,000 megawatts worth of power. But unfortunately, with power accelerators, just like the converter, the power fluctuates between 500 and 1,500 megawatts, which is wild. You're also going to need one converter that will consume 400 megawatts per minute, and eventually you're also going to need 2 constructors that will consume just 6 megawatts per minute, which is nothing in comparison to this behemoth. but in total this brings our power to roughly 2,406 megawatts per minute. However, because we're using particle accelerators and converters, this will fluctuate massively. So at 1 minute, this might be 1,600 megawatts, the next minute will be 2,300. You're not doing anything wrong on your end, that's just how the power works when it comes to these two machines. And when it comes to raw resources, we are consuming 400 coal per minute to make our 20 diamonds, and 200 SAM per minute to make our reanimated SAM. Remember, 4 SAM produces 1 reanimated SAM, so that's how we get to our total here. So is this recipe good or not? Well, we've got nothing yet to compare it to, so let's bring in our second recipe of the day, which is the dark matter crystallization. And again, here we can instantly see power consumption's pretty wild, but to make this thing is slightly easier. Is it better though? Let's take a quick look. And again, we are trying to make ourselves 20 dark matter crystals per minute. For this, we are going to need 200 dark matter residue. Remember, you can get this for free using the quantum encoder, or you could just produce it in the converter. If you do indeed tend to do this, it will set you back 100 reanimated SAM and about 800 megawatts worth of power, since we are using 2 of these things. Here's a quick example of what I mean by fluctuating power. As you can see here, we are producing diamonds from coal in our particle accelerator, and when we actually check our power itself, you can see it's a bit weird. At some moments, we are going as low as 300 megawatts, but we're also peaking at roughly 700. And eventually when this hits roughly there, it's going to start to go back down again. So it's not a constant power consumption, even though this is the only thing that this power network's actually connected to. It's extremely weird, but that's just part of the game, unfortunately. So in total, for the dark matter crystallization recipe, the only thing that we need is 400 SAM, and that's confirmed by this down here. So let's have a quick look at the machines needed as well as the power consumption. It does say here that we will be consuming 1,500 megawatts worth of power just from our one particle accelerator. However, I've got a feeling this will be a lot less, since I believe this thing's 1,500 megawatts if this is at 250% efficiency, which obviously it's not going to be, so hopefully it will be a bit less. Regardless, you're also going to need 2 converters and 4 constructors, bringing our total of power to, again, roughly 2,313 megawatts, and that is if everything is being produced at, well, according to this power. So despite us consuming quite a lot of SAM, we are consuming 0 coal per minute, and this recipe is a lot easier to construct than the first one. So how would our third and final recipe compete with our previous 2? Well, let's take a minute to find out. Starting off with the actual recipe itself, where we are going to be needing 20 dark matter crystals per minute for our dark matter trap recipe. First of all, let's start with the time crystals. We are going to be needing 10 time crystals. This requires 20 diamonds, which is then made from our 400 coal, like we previously discussed in the first recipe. This is the exact same amount. We're also going to need 50 dark matter residue, which then requires 25 reanimated SAM, which then requires 100 SAM to make, which is the lowest amount of SAM in any of the 3 recipes we've seen so far. Power consumption is more of a guess, but one thing that we do know though is that we need 1 particle accelerator, 5 converters, and 1 constructor. And in total, again, the maximum amount of power you'll be needing, is 2,540 megawatts, roughly. But again, I feel like the power is way too high. And to conclude for this recipe, again, that's 100 SAM and 400 coal per minute. But how does that compare to the other 2 recipes in regards to power consumption and resource consumption? Well, let's get power out of the way with first. Unfortunately, it's very, very difficult to find the exact lowest amount of power being consumed, since they are all rough estimates. But if what we have in front of us is true, then this middle recipe right here consumes the lowest amount of power, which is the dark matter crystallization recipe. When it comes to resources though, that's a slightly different story. Let's have a quick look here. Our basic dark matter crystal recipe consumes 400 coal and 200 SAM, and that again is with using the standard diamond recipe, but there are many to choose from if you so wish. Again, definitely do check out that video that I mentioned earlier if diamonds is a problem for you. Our second recipe, which is the dark matter crystallization, only consumes SAM. However, it consumes double the amount of SAM that we were using before, and quadruple the amount of SAM as our final recipe, which is the dark matter trap, which only uses 100 SAM and 400 corn. This is actually slightly strange because, as we can see, when we move these two recipes closer together, you might notice that this recipe is the exact same like this recipe, except it consumes 100 less SAM. When it comes to power, it does consume a little bit more. Despite that, if you're okay with consuming a little bit more power than our basic recipe, I actually recommend you go with this recipe right here, since it saves you 100 SAM compared to the basic recipe, and depending what diamond recipe you use, this can be relatively cheap. You're probably not going to have to make thousands of dark matter crystals, but you're most likely going to have to make quite a few. So if you do choose to make this recipe, I don't recommend going with the basic recipe. Instead, go with this dark matter trap recipe, since it's the exact same except you're making time crystals, and you save 100 SAM per minute, which is great since it's not the easiest resource to find, and everything else is identical. So, in my opinion, the dark matter trap is the best dark matter crystal recipe in Satisfactory 1.0. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to drop a like. I have made many videos just like this that you might find interesting if you want to find the best recipes in Satisfactory 1.0. Regardless, thank you very much for watching. Before we go, a massive shout out to the Knights of the Realm channel members. We have Asuna Yuki, Variance, The Tormal, Yamikel Burns, Heros Rising, Scotland Hattie, and Mau Mau. If you decide to become a Knight of the Realm for just £2.99 a month, you get access to channel-only emotes, unique badges, and also shoutouts in videos. Memberships are the best way to support my channel, but you don't have to become a member. Even just by watching today's video, you are supporting the channel massively. Here's a couple more videos I've made that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Have an amazing rest of your day, and remember, Godspeed.